Thank you. Of course, the sun starts shining right when I'm about to start. It making it impossible to read my screen, so hold on just a second. Let me clean that off a bit. COVID lockdowns. It made us all a little crazy, right? Right? Now, I'm not going to step into the minefield that is discussing the efficacy of lockdowns. Don't worry. But we can all admit we did some wacky things during lockdowns, right? I remember going to the grocery store for the first time during our very first lockdown when we lived in Turkey. At the time, we understood very little about the disease, and so I went to the grocery store prepared for anything. Like I wore boots, had long pants, a long sleeve shirt, I had the mask, the glasses, the hat. Went to the grocery store, bought everything we needed, came back home. As soon as I got home, I threw all my clothes in the washing machine, put it on the hot cycle, got in a shower, and scrubbed myself down for an hour, right? But I wasn't even the craziest one. I saw videos on social media of people wearing full hazmat bio suits going to the market. Now, if that was you, I'm really sorry. I'm not making fun of you. I'm sure, like me, you were doing the wisest thing at the time. I don't want to belittle that. But we all did some kooky things, right? Some of us went to the market and bought up all the toilet paper they had. Yeah. Others began excessively exercising or spending all of our disposable income on plants and gardening tools. Is that anyone? Anybody start planting, gardening during COVID? There we go, Deborah. Yeah. Some, like my lovely wife, began baking bread, a lot of bread, like an unreasonable, aggressive amount of bread. We tried sourdough, herb bread, cheese bread, fruit bread, sweet bread, white bread, whole wheat bread, short bread, long bread, banana bread, pumpkin bread, soft bread, crusty bread, bread. That we ate so much bread during COVID lockdown. And so many of us began making bread that there were flour and yeast shortages around the world. In fact, Google documented all-time highs in searches about bread making. Many, like my lovely wife, became really good at baking bread. And now in 2023, a lot of us are enjoying the fruits of our hundreds of loaves of bread that we baked during COVID lockdowns. In fact, nearly every week, someone brings a loaf of freshly baked homemade bread to our life group. So, shameless plug for our life group. If you want a fresh loaf of bread, come to our life group this Tuesday at Anu's house, right? Anu and Libby, this Tuesday night? Okay, good. Let me know if you want to come. Bread has been an important part of many societies and has been a staple for the diet of countless people for millennia. And in Exodus 25, God commands a table to be made. And this wasn't just any table. It was a table that would be used in the holy place of the tabernacle. And the primary function of this table would be to hold bread. So let's read about this table in Exodus 25, beginning in verse 23. Exodus 25, verse 23. You shall make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. You shall overlay it with pure gold and make a molding of gold around it. And you shall make a rim around it a handbreadth wide, and a molding of gold around the rim. And you shall make for it 4 rings of gold, and fasten the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs. Close to the frame the rings shall lie, as holders for the poles to carry the table. You shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. And the table shall be carried with these. And you shall make its plates and dishes for incense, and its flagons and bowls with which to pour drink offerings. You shall make them of pure gold, and you shall set the bread of the presence on the table before me regularly. So naturally, your first question should be, what is this bread of the presence? Good thing you asked. Turn with me to Leviticus 24, beginning in verse 5. And I forgot to ask you to stand last time, so we're going to stand this time. How about that? Leviticus 24, verse 5. You shall take fine flour and bake 12 loaves from it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each loaf. And you shall set them in 2 piles, 6 in a pile, on the table of pure gold before the Lord. And you shall put pure frankincense on each pile, that it may go with the bread as a memorial portion, as a food offering to the Lord. Every Sabbath day Aaron shall arrange it before the Lord regularly. It is from the people of Israel as a covenant forever. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in the holy place. since it is for him a most holy portion out of the Lord's food offerings, a perpetual due. You can have a seat. So in these verses, we'll see that through the table and the bread, God displays his presence among his people, his provision for his people, and that he himself is the portion for his people. Presence, provision, and portion. You liked the PPP, didn't you? That was nice. Presence, provision, and portion. First, through the table and bread, God displays his presence among his people. When you think of a table, what comes to mind? A meal, right? When we moved to Cologne a little over a year ago, we had zero furniture. We had to buy everything. And I mean literally everything. Beds, couches, bookshelves, everything. As a family, we personally paid the IKEA CEO's salary last year. So you're welcome, IKEA. One of the last things we bought was a dinner table. It took us a really long time to find something that we liked. We were looking for something very specific. It had to be big and functional and practical, yet stylish and look good in our house. This was probably the most important piece of furniture in our home because we enjoy hosting people in our home. Caroline loves inviting people over and cooking for them, bread and other things. And I like it too because I get to eat Caroline's really good food with our guests. We enjoy it, but we're also commanded to do it. The New Testament is full of commands for us to show hospitality to others, especially one another in the church. And hospitality is most often expressed through a meal. Now, why is this important to God? Because a meal is a sign of fellowship. It's a sign of brotherly love and affection between two people. It's a sign that people have a relationship with one another. And that's what's so amazing about what happened in the last chapter in Exodus 24. Verse 9 says, Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief of men of the people of Israel. They beheld God and ate and drank. In Exodus 19, God told the people to not come close to the mountain, and that anyone who touched the mountain would surely die. Yet here in Exodus 24, God invites them up to the mountain. They saw God, and they ate with him. Of course, God has no needs and therefore has no need to eat. So the meal was not about the food. God was displaying to his people that he wants to have a relationship with them. And here in these verses in Exodus 25, God is showing that this meal with Moses and the elders of Israel, it was not a one-time event. By designing this table and commanding fresh bread be made for it, God was telling his people that he will have regular communion with them. God will be present with them. God is not some distant deity that set the world in motion and then just abandoned it. And God has concern for and desires a relationship with his people. Despite their consistent rejection of him, despite their sin, despite our sin, God desires relationship with us. God desires to be present with his people. In fact, the entire tabernacle is part of God's plan to once again dwell among his people. It's God's initiative to return back to the Garden of Eden. Remember in Genesis 3, after Adam and Eve sinned, they were expelled from the garden. They were kicked out of a place where they had harmonious relationship with God. And as God unfolds his plan for redemption, he gives us hints and glimpses of this garden theme throughout the Bible. Maybe that's why we garden so much in COVID lockdown. The garden theme is especially clear in the instructions for the tabernacle, the place where God would once again live among his people. In many ways, the tabernacle is modeled after the Garden of Eden. One author wrote this: where Eden had the tree of life, the tabernacle had a tree-like lampstand, which we're going to study next week. This lampstand had branches, flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms. It was essentially a tree with candles on it. When a priest looked towards the curtain barring entry into the most holy place, which we're going to read about in Exodus 26, he would see two cherubim embroidered in it, staring back at him. Just as the cherubim guarded the path back to Eden at the end of Genesis 3, the most holy place was guarded by cherubim. The tabernacle is one step in God's plan to make right what went wrong in Eden. Whereas Adam and Eve's sin broke the relationship between God and man, God put the pieces back together. Through the table, the bread, and the entire tabernacle, God reminds his people that he is always with them. And this is astonishing because so far in Exodus, the Israelites had on many occasions questioned the goodness of God. When they had little food or water, instead of crying to God for help, they complained to Moses about God. Do you remember this? Oh God, we wish you would just left us in Egypt in slavery instead of calling us out and freeing us to follow you. Later in Exodus 32, while Moses was still on the mountain getting these instructions for the tabernacle, the Israelites were at the bottom of the mountain rejecting and rebelling against God. A little bit of foreshadowing that we're going to come to later. Exodus 32, verse 1. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Verse 4, and he, Aaron, received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Consider this. The Israelites, up to this point, had witnessed God send the 10 plagues to deliver them out of slavery in Egypt. They witnessed God open the Red Sea, and they walked through the sea on dry ground with walls of water on each side of them. God had led them through the desert with pillars of cloud and fire. When they had no food, God literally rained manna from heaven. When they had no water, God made it flow out of a rock. In chapter 24, they literally saw and shared a meal with the God of the universe. Who else in the history of the world has experienced and witnessed more of the proof of the existence and the goodness of God? Yet, in less than 40 days when Moses was on the mountain, they had already lost faith in Moses. And not only Moses, they had also lost faith in and rejected God who was on the mountain with Moses. But God knew they would do this. As he was giving these instructions to Moses, God knew that what was going on at the bottom of the mountain. Despite this, God promised to be with them. The Israelites didn't deserve God's presence. They didn't earn relationship with God, quite the opposite. They deserved death and destruction. Yet God still promised to be with them. And this was important because hard days were coming. They were soon going into the land that God had promised them. They would have to go to war with people far greater and more powerful than themselves. God had promised them that they would be victorious, but the conquest of the land would test their faith in God immensely. We too have seasons and sometimes even years that our faith in God is tested. I know many of you have experienced visa issues, financial problems, joblessness, prolonged illnesses, physical pain, and the death of loved ones. It can be easy to question the goodness of God or even if he is still with us. Sometimes we may ask ourselves, does God hear my prayers? Is God there when I'm hurting or when I'm scared? Brothers and sisters, this table and the bread are God's promise that he will never leave or forsake us. God is with us always to the end of the age. Through the table and the bread, God displays his presence among his people. He also displays his portion for his provision for his people. God shows his provision in both the bread and the table. There's a lot of symbolism in these verses that I don't want us to miss. In the description of the bread in Leviticus 4, verse 5 says, "You shall make fine flour and bake 12 loaves from it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each loaf. And you shall set them in 2 piles, 6 in a pile, on the table of pure gold before the Lord. 2 piles, 6 in a pile, 12 loaves, representing the 12 loaves, the 12 tribes of Israel." This is a sign and a promise of the covenant between God and the 12 tribes of Israel. In God's continual meal in the tabernacle, all of his people have a seat at the table. All of us have a seat at the table. No one is left out. God ensures that all his people have relationship and communion with him. And again, this is not a one-time or infrequent event. The text says the bread was refreshed weekly. Look back at verse 7. "And you shall put pure frankincense on each pile, that it may go with the bread as a memorial portion, as a food offering to the Lord. Every Sabbath day, Aaron shall arrange it before the Lord regularly. It is from the people of Israel as a covenant forever." Every week, without exception, this bread was replaced as a reminder of God's generous provision in the past and as a continual promise that God would provide for them forever. And in verse 9, the priests were told to eat the old bread as they replaced it with the new. Verse 9 says, "And it shall be for for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, since it is for him a most holy portion out of the Lord's food offerings, perpetual due. Now, I hope I don't burst any bubbles here or ruin any kids' imaginations. So I'm going to talk about the big man who dresses up in red and comes at Christmas. So if there are any kids that still believe in Santa, let's close their ears. There's a tradition in America, I'm not sure if this is where you're from. When I was a kid, every Christmas Eve night, I would put out a plate of cookies and a glass of milk for Santa Claus. And every Christmas morning, I'd get out of bed, I'd run into our living room, I'd see the gifts under the tree, and then I would immediately run into the kitchen to see a plate, the empty plate, and the empty glass of milk. I'd run there to see if he had eaten the cookies, and every year, the cookie plate and the glass were both empty. Even after I found out the truth about old St. Nick, I would still put the cookies out every single year, and the milk as well. Of course, I knew it was my mom, not Santa, eating, but I still played the game. Now, like Santa's empty cookie plate, God could have acted like he ate the bread and taken away the 12 loaves, left a plate of crumbs, and told the priest to go outside of the tabernacle and show the people, look, God ate the loaves, he's still with us. But in these verses in Leviticus, God doesn't play any games. God doesn't have any needs. He doesn't even act like he has any needs. God needs nothing from us. He only provides for us. Even in an offering to God, God provided for those who serve him, the priests. It probably wasn't exactly what they had an appetite for. I could be wrong, but I doubt these priests really look forward to eating this week-old bread every single Sabbath day. Still, God provided sustenance. It wasn't Kobe steak and lobster or caviar or foie gras, but it met their needs. It filled their bellies and allowed them to continue to serve them another week. This bread is a reminder that God will always provide for us as well. Oftentimes, it's not exactly what we want, but God will provide exactly what we need. And not just with the bread, but also with the table. Think back to the description of the table. Did you notice anything about it? It's a lot of details, right? There's specificity and order. There's beauty and richness. In the ESV, gold is mentioned 6 times. In Leviticus 24, the bread was to be made of fine flour and was to be seasoned with frankincense. What's God trying to teach us here? God is demonstrating that there is a prescribed way to worship him. If this table and this meal is representative of our relationship with God, God is the one who determines the specifics of that relationship. God sets the terms of our bond with him. Has anyone seen the TV series The Office? Anyone want to admit that? Yeah, everybody know Dwight Schrute, probably everyone's favorite character, right? I recently listened to a podcast in which the actor who played Dwight Schrute, Rainn Wilson, was interviewed about a new book he had written on spirituality. The book essentially teaches that all religions are of equal worth. It doesn't matter who or what you worship or how you worship that person or thing. The most important thing is that we worship someone or something. The only thing that's important is that we're spiritual. If the Bible is true, this definition of spirituality is hopeless nonsense. If the Bible is true, the triune God is the one and only God. And if we are to worship him and serve him and follow him and have a relationship with him, he defines the conditions, not us. We cannot do or believe something that is contrary to the Bible and call it worship of the God of the Bible. God and God alone sets the terms of our relationship with him. God determines how we worship and how we relate to him. And for this specific table, God required a significant amount of gold. Now, at this time, the Israelites were wandering around in a barren desert. Where in the world were they going to get all this gold? God didn't tell them to make this gold, you're going to need about 1 kilo of gold. To make this table, you're going to need about 1 kilo of gold, so good luck. No, he gave them instructions for worship, but he had already provided all they need to fulfill this command. Think back to Exodus 12. Immediately before Exodus 12, God had just sent the 10th and final plague to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Let's read Exodus 12, beginning in verse 33. The Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We shall all be dead." So the Israelites, took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls being bound up in their cloaks on their shoulders. The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they let them have what they asked. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. This is the gold they would use to make the table for bread and other furniture, cups, bowls, plates, and utensils for the tabernacle. God knew what he would require for his people to worship him, and he provided that thing. He provided the thing they needed before they even knew they needed it. Through the table and bread, God displays his provision for his people. They were constant reminders that God provides everything we need to worship him, to have a relationship with him. And in order to have a relationship with God, we must be completely holy because God is holy. We must be completely righteous because God is righteous. How many of us are holy and righteous? Not me. So how can we have relationship with God? How can sinful man have relationship with the perfect, pure, and holy God? Through the table and the bread, God displays that he himself is the portion for his people. God provides exactly what we need to have relationship with him, and that is himself, Jesus Christ. The tabernacle, the table, the bread, it all points to and finds fulfillment in Jesus. In John 6, after Jesus had fed the 5,000, the crowds came back to Jesus hungry again. And Jesus questioned their motives and challenged them not to seek things that are temporary like bread, but to seek and believe in that which is eternal, Christ himself. Let's read these verses beginning in verse 30, John 6, verse 30. So they, the crowd, said to him, "Then what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus then said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." They said to him, "Sir, give us this bread always." Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." The manna in the wilderness and the bread in the tabernacle were merely foreshadows. They were appetizers for the true meal that is Jesus Christ. If you remember back in Exodus 16, when the Israelites complained about a lack of food, God rained manna down from heaven. The manna met their needs for that day, but the next day they were hungry again. In Leviticus 24, God told the priests to eat the bread of the presence every single Sabbath, but the next week they ate it again and again. In John 6, Jesus fed the 5,000, but the next day the people were hungry, and they came looking for him again. Even these breads, which were given by God, did not ultimately fulfill them. They were only temporary solutions to an eternal problem. Jesus Christ called himself the bread of life. That means he fulfills the deepest longings of our souls and satisfies our greatest need. That is restored relationship with God. Jesus is the true and better manna. He is the true and better bread of the presence because he is God in the flesh dwelling among us. No longer will God's relationship with his people be represented by 12 loaves on a golden table that must be refreshed weekly. Now, we can feast on the bread of life that truly fills our souls forever. When we trust in Jesus, our hunger for a relationship with the eternal God is decisively satisfied. Jesus Christ, the bread of life, is our portion. He is everything we need. Our feasting on this bread, the bread of life, is illustrated in communion in the Lord's Supper. When we eat the bread and drink the cup in communion, we're telling ourselves and others that only through Jesus Christ's perfect and final sacrifice, only through his broken body and spilled blood can we have relationship with God. Jesus Christ is our portion. But even communion is something we do over and over again because even communion itself is temporary and points to something even better, a great feast at the end of time. Revelation 19 describes the marriage supper of the Lamb when God's people throughout history, from Adam to us and beyond, will be face to face with him. We will no longer know and experience him spiritually from afar. We will feast with him face to face, physically. Brothers and sisters, when we are face to face with God, when we feast together with God, all of our longings and dissatisfaction with life, all of our loneliness, all of our pain, our physical, spiritual, emotional, psychological pain will be gone forever. All of our needs, wants, and desires will be eternally fulfilled by the bread of life. Revelation 21 says this, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away.'" Through the table and the bread of the presence, we see temporary truths that will be completely fulfilled in the end of time. In the time of the Exodus, God was present with his people. Today, he is present with his people, and he will forever be present with his people. God has provided, he continues to provide, and he will forever provide for his people. And God has always been our portion. He is our portion today, and he will always be our portion for eternity. So I have a few questions for us to think through when you come visit our life group this week. 3 questions. How did the table and the bread promise God's presence among his people? How has God been present with us in times of loneliness, pain, and fear? How did the table and bread demonstrate God's provision for his people? How has God provided for us in our greatest times of need? And last, what does it mean that God is our portion? How does this truth determine the way we relate to him? Let's pray. Gracious God in heaven, we thank you that you are always with us and always provide for us, even though we do not deserve it. When we suffer, when we have fear, when we feel alone, may the bread and the table be a comforting reminder that you are good. You will never leave us or forsake us. You are with us always to the end of the age. We thank you that you are our portion. Though we deserve eternal separation from you in hell because of our sin, you came in the flesh. You took our punishment, you died in our place, and rose again, promising new life to all who trust in you. May we live differently because of that truth. We love you, God, because you first loved us. In Jesus' name, amen.